Okay, I'm going to take two images that I have here. This one of the bison on the prairie, and I have another image here of these two big bison heads in the kind of the middle of the rest of the bison. So I'm going to begin with just taking this image and dragging it up to that tab down to the picture and letting go. And so I've got my first picture on top of the other. And I'm going to set this image right here. I may end up moving it a little bit as we go, but I think that I'll probably set that one right about there. And so I'm going to go to work on blending these two images. I'm going to start by just making a copy of the background layer because I want to work as non-destructively as possible, and so I want to leave that background layer alone and just use this one to work with. Alright, one of the things that I like to do when I start merging a couple of images together is I like to play around a little bit with blending modes just to get an idea of what the blend modes might do for my image. So here I go, take a look at multiply, see what that does. Makes things a little too dark. I'm going to go down to screen, which is another one that I often use, and that may have some possibilities. We'll see as we go along, and I may end up using more than one blend mode, and I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. Let's take a look at overlay. Okay, overlay is doing some kind of weird stuff that I don't like. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back to that screen blend mode, and then I'm going to make a copy of this layer. So I've got two layers of it, and both of these layers are in the screen mode. But I'm going to take this top one and go to multiply and see what that does. Ends up making it too dark. So let's try again, going to overlay and see what that does. And I'm not liking how that's working either. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this layer that I added and delete it, go back to this one, and we'll start playing around with this a little bit and see what works and what doesn't. And as I'm looking at it, one thing that comes to my mind is that I kind of want these two buffalo heads to be almost like the clouds, going over these bison down here on the ground. So these will almost be like these mythological bison up here traveling in the clouds. To do that, what I want to do is I want to make a selection of these bison heads without these other bison in the background, without these legs down here and stuff. So for the time being, I'm going to go back to normal so that we can see everything in this picture. And then we're going to just come over to the side here to where the magic wand is, and we're going to use this quick selection tool. And I'm going to do a quick selection. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and do the selection of the actual bison, even though it's typically, depending on the situation, I probably would be more likely to try getting the sky first. But this is actually working pretty well. So I'm going to stop there doing this selection, and I'm going to hold the Option key so I can subtract from this selection. I want to subtract some of the sky in here. So I'm actually just clicking, maybe dragging here a little bit through here. Okay, I want to subtract that. I'm going to subtract some of this area in there. Subtract some of this. And it's doing a pretty good job for me overall. Okay, and I think I don't want to push my luck here too much. But that's looking pretty good. I think we'll stick with that. And I will worry about, well, I keep going even though I'm saying I'm going to stop, because on one side of my brain says stop, 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 and the other side of my brain says go for it. So anyway, sometimes you just have to compromise between the two. Oops, okay, there I'm going a little bit too far. So I'm going to add a little bit in there. Okay, there we go. Okay, stop. Okay, so there's my basic selection using the magic selection tool there. And I'm going to go to this masks palette right here. And if you're not seeing the masks palette, then go up to the window menu and you'll see masks right there. You can click on that and it'll bring up the palette. And then to start the masking process, I'm going to just click on this Add a Pixel Mask button. So click on that and you'll see the result of that mask right away. But I want to refine this. You can see how this has kind of a hard edge along here all the way around. And I want the fuzziness of this fur and everything to come out. I don't want it to look like a cutout like that. So I'm going to click on this mask edge. And it comes up with this little refine mask palette or dialog box. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this radius slider, I'm going to drag that radius slider to the right, and you can see by this spinning wheel down here that it's working. And when it's done, you can see a lot of fuzziness from the fur has come back, and that looks pretty darn good. I'm going to check this box for smart radius and see if that helps. Sometimes it does, and it looks pretty good. It looks like it added a little bit more, and it looks pretty decent there. There are some other things that you can do to refine the selection. So if you know that there's some other fuzzy fur in there that's not showing up, you can go to the reveal layer, for example, so that we can kind of see, if there's more there that it's not getting. Click back. And we can say, well, it looks like it's getting it pretty good, or you might say, no, it's missing a lot, but from what I can tell, it looks like it's getting it all pretty darn good. So I'm going to leave it at that. I'm happy with that, so I'm going to click OK. And it's right now it's processing this and refining the mask that I created earlier. Okay, and there you see it with the refined mask. We can see some of this light blue. Sometimes that happens as haloing, as it's going around and picking up some color from the original picture. I'm not going to worry about that too much, because that may just go away when we do some of the other things that we're going to do with the blending modes and stuff. I am going to mask out the legs here. I think I'm just going to stick with having the heads. So I'm going to click on the mask. Here's the mask over here. The mask is already selected. So I'm going to take the brush tool, and with black as my foreground color, I'm just going to paint in here. Oh, I can see my opacity is set down to 25, so I'm going to bring that all the way up and then come down here and just kind of paint out those legs. And maybe as I get up in here, I might start softening that edge maybe a little bit more, taking my opacity down. Just kind of come in here and maybe soften that some. I probably want a fair amount of this to be fairly soft. I'm going to go ahead and kind of do that up here as well. And because this is a mask, if I change my mind and decide that I want to bring that back, I'll be able to do that. That will be no problem. Alright, let's go back to the screen blending mode and kind of see what we're getting here. And it's looking kind of cool. I think that the way that the head looks with these clouds and stuff, it's actually blending quite nicely. This fur in here for me is coming out a little too strong. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring down my opacity a little bit more on my brush, and I'm just going to come in here, and I'm painting black on the mask, just at a low opacity, and I'm just going to keep increasing the density of that black on the mask. And you can see, if you look, how this is kind of a light gray in there over that shoulder, and the more that I go on it, the darker that band is going to look. The darker it is on the mask, the more that it's hiding that part of the picture. Okay, so I'm pretty much getting there. I'm going to get rid of that almost entirely right there, so that cloud is kind of showing up a little bit more. I'm going to bring up the opacity some, because I know I want the density here to get thicker. Okay, how about that? It's looking pretty good. And let's see, just thinking if there's anything else that might be nice to do. I'm kind of liking that. Let's see what happens if we maybe move this in just a little bit further. Okay, and when I do that, there's a little bit of edge showing up here, so I need to click on this mask again, use my brush tool to hide that edge, clean that up. Okay, so that looks pretty good. There are some other things that might be kind of cool to do with this as I'm thinking about it, and that is it might be neat to get some motion blur on the fur in here, not the faces, but just this part in here. So to achieve that, I'm thinking that probably what I want to do, this could be a little bit tricky, but I'm thinking that what I want to do is make a copy here of this layer. Let's go ahead and do that. Copy that layer, and of course, just by copying it, putting it on there, it makes things look a little bit darker. But just hold on. We're gonna play with this a little bit and see what happens. So I'm gonna click on the picture, and I'm actually thinking I'm gonna delete this mask here. So I'm gonna, oops, that is not what I meant to do. Take the mask, delete it. I don't want to apply, well, actually I could apply it. That would not be a bad thing to do. So I'm going to apply it, and that way I don't have these other things in there to contend with. And now I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and I want the motion blur. And I want this pretty much just to be a horizontal blur. And I'm just going to see what happens when I make that blur even bigger. That's not exactly what I want. Let's try it in there. I'm going to say OK. And it's really going to blur the head. I don't want the heads to be blurred. So what I'll do on this layer that I just blurred is I'll get a mask, and I'm going to just paint black. Let's get that all the way up to 100%. I'm going to paint black on this area so that the head's not going to have any of that look of blur. And the same with this head here. So the only thing that's getting blur is this body of fur in there. Okay, let me hide that, show it, kind of get an idea of how that's looking, what it's doing. Another thing that we could try doing is doing a little bit of what's called wind, and what I'll do to do that is go to filter, and we want distort. It's not where it is. Sorry, as I'm looking through, here it is. It's wind right here, so I'm going to click on that. And this wind, you can say, either from the right or from the left. I want it to be from the right because I want it to kind of blow things that way with it. So let's just do a blast and see what that looks like. Not really seeing too much go on, but we can apply this filter over and over again. Here it is up at the top, ready to be applied again with just a Command F. So if I do Command F, it'll apply the filter, and I could continue to do it a number of times just to see what that's going to start doing. And I'm starting to see some effect in here of kind of this, the fur getting blown. It'd be nice if I could control that a little bit more. There are some ways that we could do that. Let's just hide and show, get an idea of maybe what's going on with that. Okay, let me try one other thing. I'm going to take my brush, and this time, instead of the brush tool here, I'm going to come to the smudge tool. Okay, and I'm just going to take my smudge tool with a little bigger brush than that has right there, and I am on the right layer there, and I'm just going to push I think that I'm getting ahead of it some. It's catching up. The effect is pretty subtle, but I think I can see it. Maybe particularly, yeah. So if I turn this off, I can see it. And the problem might be with this. Okay, that's probably not going to look cool. The black in particular. So let's go back to screen. And the effect that I'm looking for really is not happening. I'm just going to see what happens if I come down on this layer and maybe push some of these pixels. Alright, so that's going to be something that I'll need to play around with some more. Not really seeing the effect of it pushing the pixels. Maybe it'll work better if I push that. Oh, yep, now it is. Now that I've pushed up the strength, the strength was very low. So I think that you can probably see what that's doing. And this is something that I will probably want to do a whole lot more of. and I'm actually going to want to probably open up my mask a little bit so that it'll show a little bit more stuff in there. And I think I'm going to take these two layers and merge them. Oops, not visible. That's not what I meant to do. I meant to just merge layers that are selected. And let's get that back to screen where it was. For some reason that screen went away. And now there's no mask and stuff, so the advantage of that will be that as I do some of this pushing like this, you can probably see how it's getting kind of these wispy ends out here, going along with kind of what the clouds are doing. So I think you can get the main idea of that effect. And what I'm going to do in the meantime, because I don't want to sit here just doing tons of this while you're watching the video. I'm going to play around with this some more, and I'll show you the end result after I've done some more pushing and kind of playing around with pushing those pixels. But I think you can get the general idea of what's happening. Okay, so I think that's it for now. You can see the effect of these two images being blended together, and I think what I was after was trying to get this kind of mythical look of these bison heads up here in the sky with the real bison down here in the prairie. And I'll play around with that a little bit more and show you the end result, like I said. So there you have it.